What's going on, bro? Welcome to a very important video. This is going to be unlike anything I've made so far. It's going to be much longer and it's going to be much more in-depth. In this video, I'm going to be giving you the ultimate guide to building an aesthetic physique. Most of you watching this video are probably already in their first to second year of lifting, which means that you already have some basic experience as to how to get jacked and stacked. It doesn't matter what you look like, it doesn't matter what your current physique is, this guide will be of use to you, especially if your main goal is getting aesthetic and looking like Chris Bumstead. Obviously, we're not going to look nearly as good as Chris Bumstead, but I'm talking about that shape. That is the essence of building an aesthetic physique. So why should we even try to become aesthetic in the first place? Well, everyone wants to look good, everyone wants to have a really nice looking physique, and the only way really to do that is through hard work. And this is where the difficulty for most people comes in, and this is why most of our society looks like a pear instead of looking like a Dorito. Everyone wants to have a nicer looking body, but no one's willing to put the work in. Except for you. You clicked on this video and you're willing to put in the work to get an aesthetic body. There's so many benefits to looking aesthetic. You generally get more respect from the fellow men around you, you get more female attention, you increase your own confidence, and generally your life just becomes much better. You develop skills like discipline and better thinking skills through working out. And there's nothing more important than self-image, and having an aesthetic body obviously helps a lot with your self-image. It shouldn't be difficult to understand why we should be doing this in the first place. As men, we need to work hard to achieve what we want to achieve, regardless of what it is. If it's not difficult to do, it's probably not worth doing. Now, let's define the main goal of this guide. Obviously, we want to get aesthetic. Now, what we're trying to do by aesthetics is essentially bodybuilding, except our main goal isn't necessarily mass entirely, or looking lean entirely whilst having as much mass as possible. The main emphasis of building an aesthetic physique is the shape of the body. We want to look pleasing to the eye. We want to look like Andrew Jacked, for example, like Chris Bumstead. These guys have these kinds of physiques that are very original because of the fact that they aren't just big, muscular and shredded men. They are men with very wide shoulders, a very small waist, and excellent proportions, creating that V-taper, which is extremely visually pleasing. We're not trying to look like Ronnie Coleman. We're not trying to be as strong as Larry Wheels. Again, we want that aesthetic physique. We want the wide shoulders, the small waist, and the overall balanced physique. Now, this means that the main focus is, of course, on the upper body. However, without training legs, all of your work might as well go to waste, because you can have that V-taper at the top, but if you got chicken legs, it just looks terrible. You might be able to relate if you've seen some people at the gym with chicken legs. There's these guys who walk in with tank tops and they got like long pants on, they got no legs. Yeah, some people have that problem because they have knee pain, they have hip pain, whatever. But generally, most people who don't have legs because they just don't put in the work. And that hinders your physique significantly, more than you can imagine. So obviously, don't skip legs. It might not be the biggest priority because we're focusing on the upper body and getting an aesthetic upper body, but you also need your legs. It's not only about the V-taper, it's about the X shape. We want to look aesthetic like this from the top and aesthetic like this from the bottom. It's that X physique, instead of simply focusing on the V-taper. Whilst doing this, we also want to keep a low enough body fat percentage to look nice. However, I will address this later on in the guide because it's very difficult to maintain a low body fat percentage without first building some muscle. I'll talk about that later. Another thing is we want to have beautiful muscle insertions. You can't do this unless you're genetically gifted. So if your abs look kind of blocky, if they just look kind of out of shape, that's something you're going to have to deal with. At the end of the day, you're going to look much more aesthetic than 95 to 99% of the population. So I think it is still beneficial either way. But again, if your muscle insertions aren't genetically the best, then you may not look like some other people who follow this guide. However, again, you will be aesthetic, you will have wide shoulders, you will have a small waist, and you will look absolutely jacked and stacked. The point is, everybody can get aesthetic using this guide by putting in the hard work, by eating enough food, by sleeping enough, and generally structuring their life around their training. It's not a hard thing to do at all. Anyone who's gone to the gym for 2 to 3 years consistently and has all the other variables down has already built himself a very nice physique.
Heavyweight! Yeah, buddy!
Okay, welcome to the guide. This is the first step. Now, training is of course very important, as is every variable I'm going to mention in this video. But one aspect of your training you might not have considered that a lot of people actually don't look at, even though they think they look at, is that you might not be training hard enough. I'm generally talking to the person who goes to the gym, trains somewhat hard, comes home, and doesn't really get sore the next day. Specifically to that person who's been training for about 2 to 3 years has stopped getting sore from going to the gym because they've now passed the newbie gains period. Let me tell you something. Soreness does not indicate muscle growth, but not getting sore possibly indicates not growing muscle. It sounds very confusing, but generally if you don't get sore once in a while, by that I mean maybe once every 2 to 3 workouts, then you're not training hard enough. I thought that I was training hard enough. I swear to you, I thought I was training hard enough. I would go into leg day, I'd push past failure, I'd go really, really hard, but I wouldn't get sore, and I was really confused as to why I wouldn't get sore. Sometimes, yeah, maybe because you don't get a good pump. That's completely fine. Sometimes it might be because you eat a shit ton of food, and so the food's just sitting in your stomach, so you can't really get a pump because all the blood in your body is going into your stomach for digestion. This stuff happens. This is generally how it's going to work sometimes. That's completely fine. That's exactly why I'm saying it's only once in a while that you really need to get sore to indicate that you're making some progress in the gym. But if you go to the gym and you train legs hard, you haven't had a meal in like 3-4 hours, you're hydrated, you've slept enough, you got sodium down, you get a really good pump, you need to get sore the next day. You need to wake up, do a little knee extension real quick, and feel that you have the quad soreness. Feel that you have the hamstring soreness. When you go to take a shit in the washroom, when you sit down, you should have that glute soreness. You know what I mean? So if you don't feel that kind of soreness once in a while after the gym, you probably aren't training hard enough. So yes, don't panic if you don't get sore all the time, but if you don't get sore once a week, let's say twice a week even, then you're not training properly. I've been training for almost 3 years hard, and I get sore almost every single workout. Why? Because I get a really good pump, I push myself to failure and beyond on most accessory exercises, and I do the right exercises. Simple as that. I eat enough food, do the right exercises, I drink so much water, sodium intake's going good, like everything is dialed down, and when everything is dialed down, the training generally gets enhanced. Not enhanced like steroid enhanced, but enhanced. You should also feel really tired after workout. There's these weird takes that going to the gym makes you feel more energetic, which I guess kind of sort of makes sense because you get that testosterone boost, you're feeling good about yourself. But generally after the gym, you should be completely pooped. You should be out of it, dead tired. And then maybe like an hour or two later, you start getting that testosterone spike. It's like when you're at the gym, you got the spike, and then once you get really tired, it kind of goes down and then it spikes all the way back up again. That's kind of how I felt it go through my gym experience. But if you're not getting extremely tired after the gym, especially on like a leg day or a back day, if it's arms or shoulders, yeah, that's fine, right? Because there's such a small muscle group. But if you just hit chest, back, legs, you need to be done after the workout. That's how you know you trained hard enough. Next in your training, you want to make sure you're doing cardio somewhat consistently. I know gym bros hate their cardio. I hated cardio for a certain period of time, but I now love cardio. I love the challenge of it, and I love the feeling you get after you're doing your cardio. So make sure you are doing your cardio. It's very important for heart health, and the most important part of it for a lifter trying to get aesthetic is that cardio actually drives blood into those muscle groups. You might not have realized this, but it literally enhances your recovery. If you're getting blood flow to all these muscles, to your legs, to your back, your posterior chain, everything is getting blood flown to it. It's getting nutrients, oxygen. It's healing much faster than if you just go sit on your bed and do nothing the whole day after your workout. It's really important that you do incorporate cardio into your training. It enhances recovery, makes you feel better, your heart health is much better, and you won't die after 2 reps of squats. It's just really good. I know it might suck for some people, but you need to start doing cardio. Now, obviously, don't do too much cardio because that will actually hinder your gains. And the reason for that is because you can have a muscle stimulus and a cardiovascular stimulus both recover at the same rate at the same time. One of them is generally going to get hindered a little bit, or both of them are going to come down a little bit, which is the main reason why people say cardio kills your gains. However, if you do a good moderate amount of cardio, if you're not killing yourself to the point where your workouts start suffering, you can do cardio and it will not hinder your gains. Go on the Stairmaster for 20 minutes, 30 minutes post-workout, 3 to 4 times a week. Go on the treadmill, put it up to a high incline, start walking, maybe go for a jog even a little bit. You don't need to do like sprints and marathons for cardio. Just do basic, regular ass cardio, 20 to 30 minutes post-workout on rest days. Get the blood flowing and you're good. That's all you need for recovery. It will not hinder your gains. It will in fact help your gains. Next, let's talk about training smarter. So we all know we should train harder, but we should also train smarter. It's not just about training smart, not hard. It's about doing both at the same time. Because the reality of the matter is, if you're not training hard, you're not training smart. Because training soft is training dumb. Don't max out all the time, bro. Don't do it. Once in a while, it's cool. You want to hit a bench PR, you want a squat PR, that's cool. But you better not be maxing out every other week. That's not smart. You're literally not making any gains. You're not getting aesthetic. It's not helping you. I know it feels good to pull sumo and hit a sumo PR. I was there at one point. I was hitting PRs like every 2 weeks, but I was not getting much bigger. I was not putting on the pounds on the scale, and I was certainly not getting a wider physique. You can, however, do low reps, and I think this is a thing that people at times get wrong with how to build aesthetics. To build aesthetics, you don't just train from the 12 to 15 range or the 10 to 15 range. You train from every single range and use them all in your training program. What you do is maybe for some exercises, more compound exercises like the squat or the bench, you go 4 to 8 reps. Maybe you do 5 sets of 5s. Maybe you do a 5x5. Maybe you do sets of 6. Like, you can do lower reps for these compound movements and still get, even at times, a better muscular stimulus than you would with doing higher amounts of reps. And the reason for this is because once you pass like rep 10 of the squat, you're just basically relying on your cardiovascular system at this point because your muscles are taxed and your cardio is just going crazy. So you're basically getting more of a cardiovascular stimulus than you are a muscular stimulus anyways. So it would have just been better to do like a set of 6 or 5 or 8 instead of like 10 to 15 on a squat. If you do find that it's working for you, obviously stick to it. That goes for a lot of things in this guide. What I say is not final. I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy who goes to the gym. I've gotten a pretty aesthetic physique for my first 3 years of training. I know what I'm doing right now in the gym because I'm making gains, and I'm just giving you advice. You can choose to take this advice or not to take it. At the end of the day, whatever works for you is the best advice you can take. Make sure you're controlling the eccentric and make sure you're squeezing at the top of certain reps. I'm not saying squeeze at the bottom of a squat or things like that. These are compound movements. We're doing them to put on beefy slabs of muscle. We're not doing barbell squats and like stiff leg deadlifts to get like an aesthetic Christmas tree or like striated glutes. That's not what we're doing here. We do the accessory exercises for that, and we do incorporate that into the training as well. But when I say control the eccentric and focus on the squeeze, I'm mainly referring to accessory movements, specifically on the squeeze aspect of it. You can control the eccentric for everything. In fact, I recommend you do for every exercise, because not only is it much safer on your joints, you get much more time under tension, which is the #1 factor for muscle growth. And the eccentric, if you think about it, is half the entire movement. So by not controlling the eccentric, you're cutting out half the gains you could have been making. Furthermore, you are much stronger on the eccentric than you are on the concentric. So if you are lucky enough to have a spotter with you, what you can do is actually, instead of just stopping once you hit failure, let's say you're doing like an iso chest press machine, get the guy who's spotting you to help you on the way up, and then just control the eccentric down. Get him to help you up, control the eccentric down. You're just getting more and more reps there. Until you tax out the eccentric, you're not fully at failure when you really think about it. Ensure that you're getting a filthy pump. Now, muscles are surrounded in this coating of tissue called fascia. Fascia is made up of certain proteins, collagen proteins primarily, and what this does is surrounds the muscle. So once you get a pump and blood flows into the muscle, it sort of expands that muscle, right? We know this. We get the pump, we look much bigger than we generally are. The more you stretch that fascia out, the more of a muscular stimulus you really get. So it does matter how much of a pump you get. If you get less of a pump, there's less of that expansion of the muscle, less of the expansion and stretching of the fascia around the muscle. So there's less of a neurological stimulus for your body to begin synthesizing new tissue. The bigger your muscles get during the workout, the more they stretch the fascia and the skin, the bigger of a stimulus you're going to send to those muscles. I've noticed this personally from experience. You might think it's some bro science. A lot of it has to do with real science, but some of it does come from my own personal experience. So if you don't believe me, try it out. Get better pumps. Don't eat all the time before the gym if you want to get a better pump, and you'll notice you just start getting more sore, you start making better gains. That's just how it works. Better pumps equal better gains. So how do you get a better pump at the gym? Well, first of all, you need to have sodium intake down. That doesn't mean drink the ocean. That just means have adequate amounts of sodium. If you're getting cramps, you're probably not having enough. Generally, it's really hard not to get enough sodium, though. I don't really think you can in this day and age because everything has sodium in it. Obviously, hydration, again, that's another thing that most lifters have down. You can't really be dehydrated as a lifter. Bro, if your piss is basically brown, you're not drinking enough water. That's just how it works. Your piss should be like light yellow kind of thing. You know what I mean? That's generally the baseline measurement, the metric you can use to see if you're hydrated or not, or just how you feel. Because being dehydrated decreases your training by like 30% or something insane like that. Another thing for the pump that I hear no one talking about is eating before the gym. Do not eat a big meal before the gym. Whatever you do, don't even eat like a full meal 2 hours out of a workout. What I do personally is I eat breakfast, I wait like 3-4 hours, might have a snack or two, like a granola bar for the glucose, but that's about it. When I go to the gym, I get an insane pump. But what I notice is when I get back home, I'm in a rush, I gotta quickly eat a meal and I go to the gym, not only do I feel lethargic, bloated, my gas is going crazy in the bottom of the squat, but I don't get a pump because all of the blood in the body, or a lot of the blood, obviously not all of it, but a good amount of it is in your gastrointestinal area, working on digestion of that food. So if you're working on the digestion of the food, adequate amounts of blood don't really flow around to the muscles. You don't get a pump, you don't get good nutrients into those areas, and because you don't get good nutrients or oxygen in those areas, you're more prone to injury. That's just how it works, right? Because if you think about it, if you don't got blood and support in the area, like if the ligaments are cold and not working optimally, you're more susceptible to injury. So yes, pump is much more important than you thought. Make sure you can get a good pump before your workout. And as I just explained, not eating before the gym is a very good way to ensure that you do. Now this goes for my fellow first 2 to 3 year lifters out there. If you've been training consistently for 2 years, which don't get me wrong, it's pretty hard to do that. I've noticed it for the people around me. A lot of people after the first year, they just lose consistency. That's how it works. Or they lose consistency in the intensity of their training. Once you've got all the intensity and the training and the volume, all that down, like the basic stuff is down, and you've done your newbie gains, you start losing that soreness, maybe you start getting it back because you're training hard enough, you need to follow a program. That might be the most valuable advice I can give to a lifter who's in their 2nd to 3rd or even 5th year, as high as 5th year. What you do when you first start out the gym, believe it or not, is do something called linear progression. So if you've heard of linear, it's basically this. So you get what I mean? It's like constant progression. You don't really plateau at any point. It's not like this, right? That's not how it really works. It's more so linear. However, you may notice that once you get into your 2nd and 3rd year, that stops. And that's because you're now used to this muscular stimulus. What you have to do is get on a program and start using different types of progressions. My personal favorite progressions are the dynamic double progressions and the volume progressions. These are 2 that I've talked about in videos already multiple times, but for the sake of this guide, I'm going to talk about them again. Double progression is something where you essentially start off with something like, let's say 3 sets of 8. And what you do is you slowly add reps to that. So if you start out with 3 sets of 8 on the first week, then you do 3 sets of 9, 8, and 8. Then you do 10, 9, and 8. Eventually you get to like 3 sets of 10, 10, and 10. And at that point, you're like, okay, I'm not even anywhere near 3 sets of 8. So you increase the weight and you go back to 3 sets of 8. That's one way of doing double progression. That's mainly the double progression. You can split that up into another way called dynamic double progression. And that's a little bit different in the way that you're only focusing on one set of the workout. If you've hit, let's say 225 for 5 reps on the bench, and your goal for the next week is 225 for 6, as soon as you hit that, you move to 7, then 8. Then if 8 is like your threshold, you come down back to 5 reps with increased weight. That's the essence of dynamic double progression. And double progression is, just as I mentioned, similar to dynamic double progression, except you're not focusing on one set of the workout, you're focusing on all the sets for that exercise, progressing them thoroughly before dropping back down to the same rep range and adding weight. I hope that makes sense, and if it didn't, watch this video right here. Volume progression has been one of my favorites. Seriously, I grew my overhead press way more than I could have imagined because of this type of progression, and what it is very simple. You're not increasing intensity or reps or weight necessarily for a specific block. The main focus is on volume. And if you don't know what volume is, it's essentially the number of sets that you do per workout. So if you do 3 sets of 10 on an overhead press, just bump it to 4 sets of 10 once you hit 3 sets of 10. Then bump it to 5 sets of 10. Then come back down to 3 sets of 10, increase the weight. Very simple, very effective. I love volume progression. Now let's talk about exercise selection. I made a video already on the 7 best exercises for aesthetics, but obviously don't be a knucklehead and don't just use those exercises. Use a variety of exercises. Bodybuilding and aesthetics are very similar. It means you don't really need to do any different exercises. You see all the bodybuilders doing lateral raises, lat pull downs. That works very well for aesthetics as well. Gives you that V-taper. Very balanced physique. Another thing with aesthetics is that balanced physique. And in order to do that, you need to do a variety of exercises. You can't just stick with the bench press. You can't just stick with the deadlift. You need to incorporate a variety of exercises. Whatever works for you works for you. Whatever you see making gains in the way that you want is what you should do. Don't listen to some jabroni on YouTube who's telling you to do barbell, flat, decline, some whatever variation bench press. Basic incline dumbbell press works perfectly fine for you. If it works for you, it's the best exercise for you. It's that simple. But generally, you want to structure your program in a sensible manner. Exercise selection is not complicated in the slightest. Simply do the compound exercises, do the accessory exercises, do what feels good for you. Once you build size, you're going to build aesthetics generally, as long as you don't push it too far with the bulk, which is the next topic in this guide.
Good old chicken.
So this is to you hard gainers, newbies, skinny people, skinny fat people. Please be in a caloric surplus. If you are trying to cut when you look like this, you should not be cutting, you should be bulking. I don't care if you don't have abs. If you have chicken arms, if you have chicken legs, you need to bulk up. It's that simple. You need to put yourself in a surplus to build muscle. That should be your main goal. Forget about aesthetics, build muscle. That's what you need to do right now. Once you get the marble on the sculpting, then you can start sculpting the actual image. You know what I'm saying? You can't create an image without the materials first, and the materials are the muscle. So you need to build that muscle first as a newbie and then start shredding down and creating that physique, creating that V-taper, that aesthetic physique. Even if you're in your second to third year of lifting and you've already built that base muscle, it's still very, very optimal to be in a surplus and build aesthetics. So you do your lateral raises, you do your V-taper building exercises. Obviously, you train every part of your body, legs, chest, everything included, and you build aesthetics by being in a surplus. Obviously, you're not going to look your best because you got some fat on your waist, but once you trim down, that's all going to be fine, and you're going to be thankful that you bulked. Now, if you're overweight, what I recommend is maintaining your caloric intake. Now, some people are going to come at me and say main gaining doesn't work. I know, for most people, main gaining does not work. But if you're overweight and you eat at maintenance calories, what your body does is takes the excess calories it needs to grow from the fat that you're storing, so you kind of lose weight and build muscle at the same time when you're overweight. This only works if you're overweight, if you're over 15% body fat. If you're leaner than that, it's not going to work in the slightest, which is why you need a surplus. But if you're overweight, I think main gaining is a very good way to go for you. And if you're obese, cutting is like the only way. You need to cut if you're obese. You need to trim down that fat, and because you're so overweight, you can still build muscle while you're cutting because you have all that energy stored up. Your body can use it to synthesize new tissue. The next thing is very important. This is something that a lot of beginners struggle with, and it's a problem that I think if you solve, it will greatly benefit your gains. Whether you're going for aesthetics, strength, or mass, it's going to benefit you very much. And it's quite contrary to the point of this video because I'm making this video on aesthetics. But you should stop worrying about your abs while still training them. This sounds very contradictory. Why would I train them if I shouldn't be worrying about them? And why should I not be worrying about them in the first place? Well, the main thing here is that a lot of people are not able to put on the amount of muscle they have the potential to put on because they're so worried about a single muscle group. Whilst I'm someone who encourages training your abs consistently, I don't think it should be a main target of focus on your body. I don't think even if you're trying to go after aesthetics, that your main focus should be getting abs, because abs are just a small part of the big painting that is your aesthetic physique. The main thing with your aesthetics is the wide shoulders, the V-taper, and the small waist. And how are you going to get a small waist when you keep training your abs and you keep focusing on your abs and thickening that waist? So you need to kind of build a balance between the two. If you're trying to get aesthetic, yes, of course you're going to train your abs. Compound movements are not going to be enough. But at the same time, if you overtrain your abs, or if you focus too much on your abs by cutting too much, not eating enough food so you can retain those abs, you're just not going to get an aesthetic physique. This is a mistake that I personally made. There are some times where like I can bring up pictures of my physique and you can see like I was skinny, like I had no V-taper, no shoulders, no arms, but I had a shredded six-pack, so I thought that was cool. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to look aesthetic, you got to realize you're not always going to have your shirt off. You got to realize that yes, at the beach abs look nice, but in your day-to-day life, if you're trying to look aesthetic, if you're trying to look good, feel good in your own body, you need to have that V-taper, you need to be aesthetic, big, wide. That's the main goal with this guide. It's not to have abs. Everyone can get abs. If you're like skinny fat, you can get abs in like a couple months. is not that hard, man, really. Unless you're obese, you got to cut down a lot. But for most people who are between overweight and skinny fat, you can get abs pretty easily. It's not that hard. It's one muscle group. It's like if I focus entirely on biceps or entirely on back for an entire 2 to 3 months, yeah, I'm going to grow back. Yeah, I'm going to grow biceps, but the rest of my physique is completely the same. So that's the important thing. You need to focus on every muscle group in your body, including the abs, but do not put more emphasis onto something else, because especially if you do put emphasis on your abs more than your other body parts, you're going to stay skinny because you keep eating in a deficit. This is called ab anxiety. Do not have ab anxiety. It will cost you gains. When you bulk up, you're not necessarily going to lose your abs. I'm someone who's bulked for almost a year now and I still have abs. Obviously, it varies depending on your genetics, but if you notice that your abs are starting to fade once you're like 5-6 months into bulking, then yeah, maybe bring it back a little bit, sort of maintain your maintenance calories for like a week or two. And once your abs start to slowly show themselves, maybe get on a quick mini cut for like a couple weeks, get those abs back, drop some water weight, remove that kind of filter, that film on your physique, and then you can get back to eating in a surplus. You don't want to eat in a surplus the entire time, obviously, but I would say about 90% of your aesthetic building journey, or at least even 80% of your aesthetic building journey, should be dedicated towards bulking and eating in a surplus. That is, if you're starting out skinny. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, if you're starting out fat or obese, you don't want to bulk. That's just stupid. But yeah, at the end of the day, a lot of teenagers and a lot of young guys worry about their abs. They think girls like abs. That's subjective depending on who you talk to, but at the end of the day, if you want to look aesthetic, you can't always focus on abs. You gotta train them like every other muscle group in your body, but it can't be your main focus. There are 3 out of gym variables that I want to talk about. Well, there's 4, but there's 3 because I like to make it a cool acronym. I call them the 3 S's, and they are sleep, stress, and sodium. If you got these 3 things down, you're most likely going to be set to go in terms of your out of gym variables. Now, sodium, you're kind of thinking like, why am I just saying sodium? Well, the more sodium you eat, the more water you drink. So I guess you could kind of tie sodium in to hydration, because if you eat a shit ton of salt and you just don't drink water, then the whole point of that salt is useless. So you obviously need to stay hydrated too. It's another thing, but I think it's extremely difficult not to stay hydrated. Personally, if you're an athlete, I've known that being hydrated is just kind of a necessity. So if you're not hydrated already, then that's on you, bro. You need to get hydrated. You need to drink enough water. And obviously sodium, as I said, is part of the 3 S's. The second one is stress. Keep your stress levels down. Don't get too stressed about school assignments, work, whatever you're doing. Don't get too stressed about things in life. Just breathe, relax, meditate consistently, journal consistently, do proper mental health habits so you just don't get stressed all the time. It is really detrimental to your muscle building, because with an increase in cortisol, the hormone that is responsible for the long-term stress response, the less testosterone you actually get to release. And the less testosterone you release, the less muscle you build. Furthermore, cortisol actually breaks down glycogen in your muscles and in your liver to turn into blood glucose. So that literally just means you're shrinking your muscles temporarily because you're reducing the glycogen and their energy potential. You might notice after a day of long, hard, stressful work, your workout at the gym is completely shit. Cortisol has a lot to do with that. And lastly is sleep. Everyone knows you need to sleep to get big. Big guys sleep big as well. Not just eat big to get big, but sleep big to get big as well. Make sure you're getting 8 hours, even 7 hours actually asleep, as in unconscious asleep, not just in bed, but fully asleep for at least 7 to 8 hours. That's enough for most people. If it's not, then up it. If it is, then maybe you can lower it as much as you have to. At the end of the day, if your workouts are suffering and you got everything else down, it's probably your sleep. But bro, honestly, it's not that hard to build an aesthetic physique. A lot of people think like going to the gym is insanely hard. It's so impressive if someone's going to the gym consistently. It's really not. Gym is fun for most people who actually start lifting. For gym bros, it's amazing. For me personally, being a student and everything, having so many things to deal with, it is absolutely the best part of my day, most days, going to the gym. There's something about it that I really enjoy. So for me, it is very easy to stay consistent, but I understand that for some people just starting out, it is hard to stay consistent, especially if you've never been to the gym or if you're overweight and obese. I understand that consistency may not be easy for everybody as it was for me. But at the end of the day, if you develop passion for going to the gym, you're going to stay consistent. You're going to keep moving forward on the path to becoming aesthetic and to becoming bigger. I hope this guide was of use to you. I'm very happy to be posting this online on YouTube for free instead of charging you some bullshit money for some bullshit course. That's it for this guide. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want longer videos like this one, I would appreciate a like or a comment. But that's it for me. Remember to reject mediocrity and embrace mastery, and I'll see you later.